رحم الله من قرأ سورة الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون، الذي بعد فلا يرى وقرب فشهد النجوى تبارك وتعالى، والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء وخاتم المرسلين وشفيع المذنبين سيدنا ونبينا بالقاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. واللعنة الدائمة الباقية على أعدائهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم: إن الله اصطفى آدم ونوحا وآل إبراهيم وآل عمران على العالمين. صلوات. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept the azah of Sayyid al-Shuhada that we have been doing during this month of Muharram. When we gather in the month of Muharram to commemorate the tragedy of Karbala, this is actually an opportunity that we get to re-energize ourselves as far as our faith is concerned. It is an opportunity for revival. We come to know more about our faith, to elevate ourselves intellectually. It also increases our love and commitment to Imam Hussain alayhi salam. And that knowledge with the love should force us to move in the direction of acting and living according to the values of Islam, for which Hussein gave up everything. During these Ayyam of Azah of Sayyid al-Shuhada, I was in New Jersey for about 12 days. And the theme that I had selected for those series of lectures actually were different themes that I had derived from the lecture given by a very prominent Sunni scholar of the United States of America by the name of Dr. Yasir Qazi, who is an American-born Muslim. After graduating from US, he went to Medina University, did his BA and Master's in Islamic Studies over there. So obviously when he came back, he came back with total Salafism as far as his perspective would be concerned. Very much anti-Shi'i views. But then he went to Yale University, did his PhD over there. It seems that's where he got kind of mellowed down. And at the moment, he is, and I would take his word and his statement to be the fact that he has abandoned his extreme Salafi views, doesn't consider Shias to be kafir anymore, and believes that, we can have discussions on controversial issues between the two the madhahib, between the Muslims, but in a civil manner without, insulting one another. And that attitude is to be welcomed by us, because you look at the Muslim world at the moment, in the Middle East or in Pakistan or Afghanistan, the method of dialogue is only bullets and swords. And so when you get this kind of, attitude, we have to welcome that, in this part of the world. He had given a talk almost a year ago, last year in November, on the topic of the massacre of Karbala, its historical background. And since he is a prominent scholar, I just couldn't just let it go. When I listened to his lecture, it's more than an hour, it's almost an hour, 50 minutes, where there are many positive things, but there are many issues which are controversial from our point of view, from the Aqidah perspective, as well as the history of Shiaism. He talks about different things. He talks about the origin of Shiaism as a political movement, which becomes a religious movement, according to him, after the events of Karbala. And then he also talks about the issue of, when we look at the peace treaty of Imam Hassan, he tries to portray an image in our minds that Imam Hussein was opposed to Imam Hassan when it came to the peace treaty. And he says, we actually love Hassan more than Hussein. Why? Because he made peace. And then the way he puts it, that, Hassan was the wiser one. And although he was more worthy and more righteous than Muawiyah, but for the sake of the Ummah, he gave up his power. So that is why he salutes him more and loves him more, actually. These are his words, than Hussein bin Ali. And then when it comes to the issue of, Muawiyah, the whole issue is that, we can always question or criticize his decision to make Yazid the successor, but we can never question his motives and his niyyah. Why? Because he was Sahabi. A Sahabi can never do wrong. And then he goes on to the issue of, who is to be blamed for the tragedy of Karbala. He has a list of people. Right at the top, you have the people, according to him, the Shias of Kufa are, the main culprit there who allowed it to happen. Then he puts Ibn Ziyad and Shimr all in the second. And at the end comes Yazid. Only partially, because he did not demote Ibn Ziyad, he did not punish. And so he goes out of his way, Dr. Yasir Qazi, to distance Yazid from the massacre of Karbala, to the extent of saying that Yazid didn't want Hussein to be killed. And he even comes out with a hadith from Sahih Bukhari, which kind of, according to him, gives a blank check to Yazid that he is a maghfurun lahum. He is among those who will be forgiven. And so coming from such a prominent person in the United States of America, it was not something which could be just ignored and not answered. And this is where I, decided to deal with all these different issues in the 11 majalis that I had in New Jersey. Of course, there are many other issues in there. One, and which I would like to briefly discuss tonight here, is that he says that the beginning of theological Shiaism, the beginning of our mazhab is after Karbala, and he puts it on the Shias of Kufa, that since they abandoned Hussein, he's careful of not saying they were the one who killed him. Rather, he says that their guilt was that they were those who did not go to help Hussein. And therefore, they felt this guilt and remorse and regret. And later on, they went to Karbala, and this is the group in history known as Tawwabin, those who did Tawbah. He says that is the beginning of theological and religious movement of Shiaism. And so our mazhab now by him is going back to this group of Tawwabin. He said they went to Karbala at the grave of Hussein, and because of that, their guilt, they started beating themselves. And then he says, look at these Shias, they still do that even now, after centuries, because of that guilt. And this is the point I want to discuss tonight, because I was surprised from somebody who was on that level of knowledge, to use these kinds of arguments, to portray our matam and our azar And our mourning services in Muharram is an expression of guilt, even if it was the people of Kufa who were guilty for that. First of all, this is just if. What has that to do with us? We're nothing to do with them biologically or in any way. Why should we be guilty for what people had done, 1400 years ago? If they had done something, they were responsible for it. Why are you trying to pin, our action and our aza and matam of Sayyid al-Shuhada now in the 21st century in America, for example, to what the people of Tawabin did? And this is where, very briefly, I realize we don't have much time tonight. But let us look at what is the phenomenon of aza. How does it start? And is there a place for them, for that in our deen and madhab or not? Salawat. When we talk about this phenomenon of mourning and grieving, the word aza is an Arabic term. When you add dari into it, azadari, this becomes Farsi and Urdu. So remember, there is a difference there. Aza is Arabic, azadari becomes Farsi or Urdu version of that. And basically what it means is that to mourn or to grieve when you lose someone or when, a tragedy takes place. Just by its definition, the process of mourning and grieving. By definition, this is something which is part of human nature. Mourning and grieving is very common. It is not only restricted to the Shias, everyone does that. And this is where we have to realize that this very natural phenomenon known as aza, manifests on two different levels. One on a personal level, and then on a communal or social level. When you look at it on a personal level, any human being, irrespective of their deen and madhab and their affiliation with one madhab or another, or they believe in God or not, every human being, when they see or hear about a tragedy, they would naturally react to it. Of course, the levels of reaction to a tragedy, differs from person to person. The most common, level would be that when you see or hear about a tragedy, as a human being, you feel sad in your heart. And that is the most common, expression of what is known as, knowing or seeing a tragedy. There are some people who actually are affected by it to the extent that it's not only this sadness in the heart, it reflects on their face. We know the expressions, happy face, sad face. It means that a person can even express their feelings of sadness, in the way he on his face. There are some who go even further up, where you will see a person who, knowing about a tragedy or seeing a tragedy, the reaction would be even more than just having a sad face. You will see the eyes become watery. And then there are some who react to it even more stronger, where you will see that the tears now start flowing down on their cheek. And there are some who will be impacted upon even stronger than that, where they would actually cry. And in some cases, irrespective of Karbala, in some cases when a person feels that sadness and hurt, very strongly, that person by impulse might hit his or her chest or head. If you look at some of the scenes, we have this technology now. An earthquake takes place somewhere, and then they show us the survivors. And then you see a mother, and she is told that she has lost her children. You will see, not just in Muslim societies, you will see sometimes, they are actually hitting themselves. Not because they have learned it from majlis. They don't even know anything about matam. Or for example, in a war situation, when you look at, for example, the Palestinians, and I don't think there are any Shias there. When Israeli bombs fall on their homes and, they are crushed and many of them lose their families, you will see that the Palestinian women especially, they react to that tragedy of their own personal, tragedy by actually, hitting themselves on the head or the chest. And so what we see is that the reaction that human beings show when they see a tragedy or hear about it, is of different, levels and degrees. And all these actually are very natural. It depends on how, close that tragedy is to you. If it is your tragedy, the impact would be stronger. And this is, we have to realize that, it's not only real tragedies. I am told, and this is not my observation, I'm told sometimes when people go to movies, and if it's a very, tragic, tragedy being portrayed on the screen, especially the women in the cinema hall, some of them even cry. I'm not putting you down, I'm just saying, I'm making a comment about the nature of a human being. Even though all of them who are gone there, they know this is just a story and made up, fiction and nothing else. They know it's not real. But the mastery of the person who made the film is such that when they look at it, although it's just a story, it has such a strong impact on them on an emotional level that they're reacting that way, knowing that this is not true. And this actually proves that it is part of the human nature that when you see a tragedy or you hear about it, if it is told to you in a very powerful manner, it will have an impact on you, depending on your emotional level. And this is where the question comes up. That if this is part of the fitrah and nature of the human being that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created, then how can people say this is haram? To feel sad when you hear about a tragedy? To cry when you see a tragedy? Even to react by what we call matam. This seems to be all based on the fitrah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created among human beings. Salawat. But then, some of the Muslims will come up and say, well, in Islam there is a prohibition for crying. Where does this come from? This comes from Sahih Bukhari. In the section which is known as Kitabul Janaiz, where he talks about the funeral, there he has subsections there, and one of the subsections has the title there, إِنَّ الْمَيَّتِ لَيُعَذَّبْ بِبَكَاءِ أَهْلِهِ عَلَيْهِ. The title says that the deceased, the mayyit, will be punished when the family members cry on him. Just reflect for a moment on this subtitle. Does it make sense? For a moment, let's take it as a fact that we are told that crying on a mayyit is haram. When somebody dies or when you lose somebody, you're not allowed to cry. So the prohibition is on crying. So there is a mayyit there and the family is crying. Who is doing the haram act there? Is it the mayyit or the family? The mayyit is not crying. Those who are crying are the living people. So those who are doing haram are those who are alive. And the azab will come on the mayyit. This is what Sayyid Bukhari says. Doesn't make sense. This is not the adl of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at all. And the problem is that this is all is coming because of the tradition and the emphasis put by the second Khalifa, where he actually actively used to go and forbid the people in janazah if they cry on their mayyit. And once it happened to be of a relative of Rasulullah, and the women of the family of Rasul were crying, and he comes there even on the ladies' side, and he says, don't cry. And Rasulullah says, دعهن يا عمر فإن العين دامعة والقلب مصاب والعهد قريب. That, oh Umar, leave them alone. Because indeed the eyes will shed the tears, and the hearts are normally sad, and the loss is very recent and fresh. So this is very human, reaction to losing somebody. So leave them alone. And this is not from our book. This is from Ahmad bin Hanbal and Nisai and others also. And actually, this is where we see that once Abdullah ibn Abbas mentioned this insistence of the second Khalifa to al-Mu'minin Aisha, that this is what he says. Look at her response. She says, لا والله ما حدث رسول الله إن الميت ليعذب ببكائه الحي عليه. She says, by Allah, Rasulullah never said that the mayyit will be punished if the family cries on the mayyit. And then she says, حسبكم القرآن. Why don't you follow the Quran? ولا تزر وازرة وزر أخرى. There is an ayat of Quran which says a soul or a person will not be punished for the sin of somebody else. So why should the mayyit be punished for the sin of those who are alive? And this is where we see that this whole issue of saying that it is prohibited to cry in a tragedy or when you lose somebody, this is part of the human nature, and there is no prohibition in Islam about it. The prohibition is not on the eyes. The prohibition is on the tongue. Do not complain against the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The prohibition cannot go on the shedding of tears or crying on a tragedy. Because we have the examples from the Quran. You have Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam, knowing his son is, not dead, but alive and lost. And he cries till he almost, lost his eyesight. Our own Prophet, when it came to Ibrahim, his son, at the time of the burial, one of the companions saw him, crying. And he says, Ya Rasulullah, and he said, well, this is the time. This is where the hearts become sad and the eyes shed tears. Salawat. So on a personal level, this is part of human nature. And Islam cannot stand against the nature created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let us now look at this whole process on a communal level, on a social level. That and let me not even go to religion at the moment. We have nations around the world. We have communities and religious groups. And sometimes tragedies happen, not because the person was an individual. The tragedies happen because of the national, nature or the religious nature, where people lose a group of, individuals or one person. Not because of that, person himself or herself, but because that person represented that group. And when you have that kind of loss, the whole community is affected by it. And the community together then starts, expressing their grief and their mourning process. What do we have when we talk about this Memorial Day? What is it? Memorial Day in Canada or in US is for what? Remembering those who lost their lives for the values and the ideals of this country. And this is where we realize that, okay, those people who were killed were not killed because they are so and so. Rather, they were the army of this country or this nation, representing the values of this nation or this country. You know, the example of 9/11 is there. That's America's tragedy. And I'm not talking about, who did it, and conspiracy theories and this and that. That's not the topic. I'm just looking at that in the perspective of Azar. That when America had its own, tragedy, what happened? The sympathy expressed or the memorial services which were held were not confined to the downtown, New York, Manhattan, or just to the city of New York, or not, or only the state of New York. No, the whole nation came together to mourn and grieve, to be part of, this process. Not only the whole nation, but the international community, even Iran and Libya of those days. They expressed their sympathy to the American nation on their loss and tragedy. Not only that, and I can never forget that this was 6 months after 9/11, that your White House, announced that they are going to having a 6 months anniversary memorial. When I heard about it, I said, this, in Urdu we have this Chemahi Majlis. And I said, where did this come from? I don't know if it's there in Iran and Iraq or not, but normally in South Asia, in Urdu and Gujarati, when somebody dies, we don't only have Chehlum and Arba'in for that person. Even 6 months after his passing or her passing away, you have a Majlis. And then you have annual Majlis for them. So the Bush administration decided to have a Majlis. Their own Majlis and memorial service 6 months after the event. And this is where you come to realize that, this is a natural phenomenon. This is a nation affected in that way by the tragedy, and this is how they are reacting. And every year now you have this ceremony to remember those who lost their lives on that day of 9/11. But that is all secular. The question immediately comes up, well, show me in our history and mazhab, or our deen. You know the story of the Battle of Uhud, the second battle in the history of Islam, where Muslims were initially victorious, but because of the disobedience of some of the archmen at the back in the valley, the victory was taken away from them, and they were defeated. And when the Prophet came back to Medina, passing by the streets of Medina, he came to Masjid al-Nabi, his house was there. And even the house of Hamza, the uncle of the Prophet, was in by the masjid. Of course, the door opened on the other side for them. And when the Prophet passed by, he said, the people who have been killed from my community in Uhud, every house that I passed of those shuhada, there were people, women crying for them. But then he felt, وَلَكِنْ عَمِّي حَمْزَةَ فَلَا بَوَاكِيَ لَهُ. But when it comes to my uncle Hamza, there is nobody to cry for him, because his family apparently was still not there. And this is an expression of sadness. Rasulullah didn't say, all others are doing bid'at and this is the right thing to do. The Ansar, the people of the companions in Medina, when they heard this, they went to their homes and they told their women to go to the house of Hamza and sit down and cry and mourn and grieve on the shahadat of Hamza. And it became a tradition after that whenever a shahadat would happen, first the women of that family would remember the shahadat of Hamza, and then they will remember their own shuhada. And so this is a communal way of, commemorating the passing away of the shuhada, the mourning of shuhada. And this is where we see that, Rasulullah, when he heard about Ansar, that what they had done by sending their women cry for Hamza in his house, he actually prayed for them. And he said, may Allah be pleased with them and their children and their descendants. And so the dua of Rasulullah was for those who do the aza of Sayyid al-Shuhada Hamza, and not only for them, for their children and descendants also. And this is where we see that, to mourn the shuhada, the martyrs of our faith, is the sunnah of Rasulullah. By his words, and also another way of sunnah is taqreer, which means something is done with his knowledge and he does not, prohibit that. So he doesn't say anything, but he lets it happen. It means that is also a sunnah of Rasulullah. And one is actually sunnat amali, where Rasulullah does something and that becomes a sunnah for us. A very prominent alim from India by the name of Shibli Nu'mani. He has a book called Sirat al-Nabi, on the biography of the Prophet. I think it's even also translated in English, because he was a very prominent Sunni alim of this century. And there he writes that in one of the journeys, Rasulullah, 7 or 8 years after the Battle of Uhud, while returning to Medina, he passes by Uhud. And according to Shibli Nu'mani, he says Rasulullah stood by the grave of Hamza and cried as if Hamza had been killed on that day. Although this is 7 or 8 years after the shahadat of Hazrat Hamza. It means even to stand by the grave of a shaheed, to do the ziyarat of the grave of the shaheed, and to cry on the shaheed is the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Salawat. Even when we look at the process of Hajj, what is it? It's in a way, if you want to understand this whole process of Azaf Sayyid al-Shuhada and how we keep remembering it every year, the justification would come from the process of Hajj. Because what do we do in Hajj? Yes, Kaaba is the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ibrahim alayhi salam and Ismail alayhi salam together built that by the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But most of the things that we do there are one way or another related to Ibrahim alayhi salam. A Nabi who came long, long before Rasulullah. Even the stone where Ibrahim stood up when the wall of the Kaaba were coming up to reach higher levels, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually ordered that stone to take the imprint of the feet of Ibrahim alayhi salam. The same Islam which abhors idol worshipping or anything close to it or anything which will bring us closer to it is either haram or it's makruh. To have a fire in front of where you are praying is makruh. To have a picture of a living thing in front of you when you are praying, it's not haram, but it is makruh. There we are told when you do the Kaaba, tawaf of the Kaaba, and then you do salat of the salat of tawaf, you do it by maqam Ibrahim. What is maqam Ibrahim? It is a stone which has the imprint of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Then you go for sa'i. That is related to Hajar and Ismail. You go to Mina. When you do the sacrifice or when you do the stoning, everything is connected with what Ibrahim alayhi salam did. The most interesting part is actually the sacrifice. We do the sacrifice in memory of what Ibrahim alayhi salam did, and we slaughter the lamb. What has that lamb to do with the lamb brought by Jibreel? Are these lambs the descendants of that? No, that was slaughtered, the poor one. Ibrahim actually, sacrificed him in place of his son. So that lamb which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent through the angel didn't have any, babies and no. These lambs that we get in Mecca and Mina, mostly they are from New Zealand or Australia. Nothing to do with Jannat and Jibreel. Still, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? In the Quran, He says this is from Sha'airullah. Even Budna, this animal that you sacrifice in Mina, coming from Australia or New Zealand, or even from Arabia itself, this is a sha'air, a sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And of course, Allah doesn't need it. He says in the Quran that, yes, I don't need the meat and the blood and the flesh of this sheep doesn't come to me. What comes to me is your intention. But even that is known as sha'airullah, the sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is where we have to realize that, yes, when you look at Azaf Sayyid al-Shuhada, this is very much similar to the process of Hajj. The only difference is that Ibrahim alayhi salam did not. He expressed his willingness to sacrifice his son, but did not actually end up sacrificing his son. And therefore on that day we do Eid and celebration. Celebration of the willingness to submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. On the day of Ashura, Imam Hussain alayhi salam not only expressed his willingness to sacrifice his son, he actually sacrificed his son. And therefore, remembering that, we do not celebrate it, rather we commemorate that. And so on the level of importance, they are both there. The difference here is that because the son was not killed eventually, that is a celebration. But here, the tragedy took place. And therefore, we do the commemoration and not celebration. And this is what we have to realize, that what we are doing actually is just what is being done at the time of Hajj. Let me just, in the summary, although I'm not that much used, even last time when I came, I said that into describing, narrating the Masaib in English, but I'll try my best. In Karbala and in Mecca, there are many, many similarities. Let me end with one. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered Ibrahim alayhi salam as a test, that you take your newborn baby, Ismail. Now remember, this is after he is 90 years old in the Quran. And he has been praying. And Allah blesses him with a child when he is 90 years old. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, well, this is the first of the test and trials for you. Take your wife and baby to a barren area, which is now known as Mecca. Whatever provision you can take for them, and then leave them and go. So whatever water and food was there, after Hajar, ran out of water, and there was an infant there, what does she do? She goes to what is known as Safa. Looking towards Marwa, and if you have gone in a desert area, I'm sure you can realize that in the summer here, even on the tarmacs in the highways, daytime, it looks far away, it looks like there is water there. And so she runs there, looking for water, thinking that there's water there. And she didn't see it. She turns around. Now she's looking towards Safa, and it was again a mirage. She thought it is water. And so she ran again towards Safa. If it was Ibrahim, the father, and I'm talking about all the fathers, he would have not gone the third time, or the fourth time, or the fifth time, or the seventh time. or the, sixth or seventh time. But this was the mother. Her feelings toward the child is different from that of the father. The father mostly, rationalizes things. I saw it twice, that's it, there's no water. But the mother, when it comes to children, she thinks from her heart. The way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created this emotion and love in her. And she goes again and again, 7 times. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loved that sacrifice of the mother, that He made it wajib till the end of this dunya. As long as the dunya will be there, Hajj would be there. As long as Hajj would be there, one of the wajib rukn and act in Hajj is that we have to remember the sacrifice of the mother by going between Safa and Marwa 7 times. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is where you get the Zamzam. Because of the sacrifice of the mother, Allah created this spring known as Zamzam, which is still there. And so it's a moment of celebration. But we see a similar situation in Karbala, between a mother and a father there. 3 days thirsty. When Imam Hussain alayhi salam, was all alone. And when he started, saying to these people that, what have I done? And when he uttered his famous words, Hal min nasirin yansuruna, this is where he heard the women crying loud. And goes back. Although the versions in the maqatil are slightly different, but if you put that together, you get that picture. He goes back to the tents, and he asks what happened. And the women say that it is Ali Asghar, who has been crying. And Imam says to Zainab that ask Rabab to bring the baby to me. I'll try to see if I can get water for him. And this mother comes. Remember, she has been observing that today whoever has gone who can carry a sword in his hand, they have not come back alive. But she was giving a baby, an infant, to Imam Hussain alayhi salam. She must have felt very hopeful that this is not a warrior going with his sword. And she gives the baby in the hands of Imam Hussain alayhi salam with full, hope that he will come back, no more thirsty. Imam Hussain alayhi salam goes there. And the way Imam pleaded, the way he went down, where he says that if I have committed a crime against you, if I have done something wrong to you, come and take the revenge from me. What is the fault of this baby? Because of the thirst of 3 days, even the milk of the mother has dried up. And this is where, if you see, the impact on the Yazidi soldiers was such that Umar ibn Sa'd al-Mal'un realized that, things can go wrong here. And therefore he ordered Hurmula Mal'un. And look at the words he uses. He doesn't say, kill Ali Asghar. He says, iqta' kalam al-Husayn. Cut off the words or the statement of Hussein. Because Ali Asghar, without saying anything, was actually the proof of innocence of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. And that is where now he is being targeted by Hurmala, and the way he was targeted. Imam Zamana in his ziyarat Nahiya, the way he uses the description there, he says, Salam on that baby who was slaughtered from ear to ear on the hands of his father. A tiny baby of 6 months, when the arrow came, basically it went in such a way that his throat was slaughtered. And the arrow comes and, hits Imam Hussain in his arm. He threw it away. But the most difficult time came, and this is where you see the similarity between Safa and Marwa and Maqtal and the Mukhayyam. Imam Hussein alayhi salam goes to the tent area, but Imam didn't have the courage to go and face Rabab, the mother. He goes back, not knowing what to do. 7 times he does that. And this is the only riwayat that I've seen from Sheikh Abbas Qummi, that divine intervention happens. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't send anything in any of the cases before. But this is where Sheikh Abbas Qummi says that a voice came from the heavens saying, Ya Hussein, da'hu fit turab, inna lahu murdi'atun fil jannah. O Hussein, bury the baby in the desert. We have arranged for a nurse in the paradise. And when I think about it, this is my own way of trying to understand why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intervene at that time. Because it seems that Fatima Zahra would have prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that, oh Allah, Rabab would not be able to see the way Asghar has been killed. Therefore ask Hussein to bury him and not to make the mother go through that much of suffering. And Imam Hussein alayhi salam buried Asghar in that field of Karbala. And when he goes towards the tent, inside, Rabab comes and she just says one thing. She says, Oh Hussein, where is my Ali Asghar? Imam didn't have any words to explain. He just showed the wound where the arrow had come, just to indicate that your son is no more. And this is where Rabab only said, Ya Ali Muthluka Yudbah, O Ali Asghar, as a child like you is also slaughtered in Karbala on today. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our amal and the azaf Sayyid al-Shuhada. May He increase our tawfiqat. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the wisdom to understand the reality of the sacrifice of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, and to be loyal to that sacrifice by living our life based on the values for which he sacrificed everything. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep the Shias of Ali, wherever they are in this world, away from the fitna of the Takfiri and the Salafis. And may He hasten the appearance of the Imam of the time, عجل الله تعالى فرجه الشريف. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.
Hussein. Ya 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 Hussein. I'm Zainab. All my life I lived in pain. I'm Zainab. I died when I lost Hussein. I'm Zainab. All my life I lived in pain. I'm Zainab. I died when I lost Hussein. I'm Zainab. All my life I lived in pain. I'm Zainab. I died when I lost Hussein. I am the mother of sorrows. Wherever I go, woe follows. I am the mother of sorrows. Wherever I go, woe follows. I'm Zainab. All my life I lived in pain. I'm Zainab. I died when I lost Hussein. I'm Zainab. All my life I lived in pain. I'm Zainab. I died when I lost Hussein. My grief started when I lost mankind's true mercy. After that lost, I lost Zahra and then Ali. The broken rib, the struck head of Ali haunts me. My grief deep in seeing Hassan dying slowly. How can I live without you now, my dear? How can I see your head shine on a spear? How can I live without you now, my dear? How can I see your head shine on a spear? I am the mother of sorrows, wherever I go follows. I am the mother of sorrows, wherever I go follows. I'm Zainab. All my life I lived in pain. I'm Zainab. I died when I lost Hussein. I'm Zainab. All my life I lived in pain. I'm Zainab. I died when my heart was shattered on the day Hussein was killed. The day of 10th when the whole world with blood was filled. Upon my mind sorrow and pain was instilled. O Lord, let our small sacrifice be now fulfilled. O Shia, when you're thirsty say his name. O Shia, curse the one who lit the flame. O Shia, when you're thirsty say his name. O Shia, curse the one who lit the flame. I am the mother of sorrows, wherever I go follows. I am the mother of sorrows, wherever I go follows. I'm Zainab. All my life I lived in pain. I'm Zainab. I died when I lost Hussein. I'm Zainab. All my life I lived in pain. I'm Zainab. I died when my life ended when I was taken back to Sham. When on a plate I saw the head of my Imam. I kept dropping my precious tears upon my palm. And now I lay under the ground where I am calm. My soul rests, but my tears are still dropping. My soul rests, and in Sham I'm now laying. My soul rests, but my tears are still dropping. My soul rests, and in Sham I'm now laying. I am the mother of sorrows, wherever I go follows. I am the mother of sorrows, wherever I go follows. I'm Zainab. All my life I lived in pain. I'm Zainab. I died when I lost Hussein. I'm Zainab. All my life I lived in pain. I'm Zainab. I died when I lost Hussein. Ya 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 Hussein. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم زيارة وارثة السلام عليك يا وارث آدم صفوة الله السلام عليك يا وارث نوح نبي الله السلام عليك يا وارث إبراهيم خليل الله السلام عليك يا وارث موسى كليم الله السلام عليك يا وارث عيسى روح الله السلام عليك يا وارث محمد حبيب الله السلام عليك يا وارث أمير المؤمنين عليه السلام السلام عليك يا ابن محمد المصطفى السلام عليك يا ابن علي المرتضى السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء السلام عليك يا ابن خديجة الكبرى السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن ثاره والوتر الموت